I never thought I would die in a grocery store parking lot while my family argued about money over my lifeless body. The chest pain hit me like a sledgehammer as I loaded bags into my truck. One moment I was thinking about dinner, the next, I was on the asphalt watching strangers call 911. The paramedics worked frantically as sirens wailed. My parents Harold and Susan arrived at the emergency room first, followed by my sister Janet and her husband Rick. But instead of comfort, I heard harsh whispers about insurance coverage and medical bills. When my heart stopped beating for the first time, the doctors shouted orders while performing CPR. My family stood in the corner debating who would be financially responsible. The fluorescent lights above the emergency room bed felt harsh against my skin as consciousness returned. My chest ached from the compressions, and monitors beeped steadily around me. Through half-closed eyes, I watched my family huddled near the door, their voices carrying despite their attempts at whispering. He should have kept his insurance when he lost that construction job. My father Harold muttered, his weathered hands clenched into fists. At 62, he still carried himself like the successful plumbing contractor he had built himself into over 3 decades. His work boots squeaked against the polished floor as he paced. My mother, Susan, adjusted her bank manager blazer and checked her watch impatiently. 6 months without coverage, and now look where we are. The hospital administrator already asked about payment guarantees. The irony cut deeper than the IV needle in my arm. 6 months ago, I had been a foreman for Morrison Construction, pulling in decent wages and benefits. The company folded overnight when the owner embezzled funds, leaving 23 workers unemployed. Cobra Insurance would have cost me $800 monthly, money I simply did not have while searching for new work. My sister Janet smoothed her designer dress and whispered urgently to her husband Rick. At 28, she had transformed completely since marrying him 2 years earlier. The sister who once shared her lunch money with me now wore jewelry worth more than most people earned in months. Rick nodded along, his real estate developer swagger evident even in the sterile hospital environment. The question is whether we can be held liable, Rick said, scrolling through his phone. My credit rating cannot take a hit right now, not with the new development projects we have pending. A young doctor with tired eyes approached our group. Dr. Martinez had been working on me since the ambulance arrived, and his scrubs showed the urgency of the situation. Mr. Thompson's condition is serious. We need to discuss surgical options immediately. Surgery? Harold's voice cracked. What kind of costs are we talking about here? Your son needs emergency cardiac intervention. Without insurance, the total could reach $80,000, possibly more depending on complications. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of my heart monitor. I felt my chest tighten again, but this time from emotional pain rather than physical distress. Susan stepped forward, her banking experience evident in her calculated approach. Doctor, what happens if the family cannot guarantee payment? Are there other options? We can transfer him to County General, but their cardiac unit is not equipped for complex procedures. The delay could be life-threatening. My heart rate spiked on the monitor, triggering alarms. Dr. Martinez rushed back to my bedside as my vision blurred. The last thing I heard before losing consciousness was my father's voice. We cannot co-sign for this kind of debt. He made his own bed by not keeping insurance. When my heart stopped for the second time, the crash team surrounded me with controlled chaos. Paddles charged and discharged against my chest while family members were pushed into the hallway. Through the glass window, I could see them continuing their discussion about financial responsibility rather than watching the medical team fight to save my life. Minutes later, my heartbeat returned to a steady rhythm. Dr. Martinez emerged from the room with sweat on his forehead and exhaustion in his voice. He is stable for now, but this cannot continue. We need a decision about his care. Harold shook his head slowly. Doctor, I own a small business. This kind of expense would destroy everything we have worked for. There has to be another way. What about charity care? Janet suggested, though her tone suggested she was grasping for solutions that would not involve her personally. The paperwork takes weeks to process. Your brother needs intervention within hours, not weeks. Rick pulled Janet aside, and I could hear fragments of their whispered conversation. This could affect our credit if we get involved. The bank looks at family financial connections. We cannot risk the new house loan. The betrayal felt worse than the physical pain radiating through my chest. These were the people who had raised me, who had celebrated my first job, who had welcomed me home when times got tough. Now they stood in a hospital hallway, calculating the financial risk of keeping me alive. Dr. Martinez returned to my bedside to check my vitals. "How are you feeling, Mater?" "Like my family wishes I would just die quietly and save them some money?" I whispered, surprised by the bitterness in my own voice. His expression softened with understanding. Family dynamics can become complicated during medical crises. People react differently to stress. This is not stress, Doc. This is showing their true priorities. Through the window, I watched Harold pull out his phone and make a call. Within minutes, I heard him explaining to someone that he could not be held responsible for my medical bills because I was an adult who had made poor financial decisions. My mother approached my bedside with the expression she used to wear when discussing overdrawn accounts at the bank. "Honey, we want to help, but we have to be realistic about what we can afford." "I never asked you to pay for anything, Mom." "The hospital is making us feel responsible because we are family. They want guarantees we simply cannot provide." The machines monitoring my condition began beeping more rapidly as my blood pressure climbed. A nurse appeared to check the readings, her concerned expression suggesting my stress levels were becoming dangerous. "You need to stay calm," she said gently. "Your heart cannot handle additional strain right now." But staying calm felt impossible, while watching my family treat my life like a business expense they could not justify. The little boy in me, who had always believed family meant unconditional support, was dying faster than my actual heart. Dr. Martinez returned with a clipboard full of forms. "I need someone to make a decision about your care. The hospital administration is pressuring me for financial guarantees." Harold took the clipboard and scanned the documents. After several minutes, he set the papers down and looked directly at me. "Son, we love you, but we cannot take on this kind of debt. You understand business realities." My heart stopped beating for the third time at that exact moment. As consciousness faded, I heard my mother say to the doctor, "Just do whatever is cheapest." We are not responsible for his poor life choices. The crash team worked with mechanical precision as alarms screamed throughout the cardiac unit. Paddles delivered electric shocks to my motionless chest while Dr. Martinez called out medication dosages. Through the chaos, I could hear the distant sounds of my family in the hallway, their voices carrying a strange calmness that contradicted the medical emergency unfolding just feet away. 4 minutes passed before my heart resumed beating. 4 minutes of clinical death while the people who had raised me discussed logistics rather than praying for my survival. When I finally opened my eyes, the first face I saw belonged to Tracy, a nurse, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Welcome back," she said softly, adjusting my IV drip. "You gave us quite a scare." "Where is my family?" The words came out as barely a whisper. Tracy glanced toward the empty hallway and hesitated. "They stepped out for a while. You need to focus on recovering." The evasion in her tone told me everything. I closed my eyes and let memories wash over me, remembering when my family had actually cared about each other. Growing up, Harold had taught me to fix plumbing pipes in the garage while Susan helped with homework at the kitchen table. Janet and I had built blanket forts and shared secrets like typical siblings. Those memories felt like stories about strangers now. "Tracy, can you tell me the truth about where they went?" She pulled up a chair beside my bed and spoke quietly. "Security cameras show them leaving through the main entrance about 20 minutes ago. They went to Morton's Steakhouse 3 blocks away." The revelation hit harder than any physical pain. While my heart had stopped beating while doctors fought to bring me back from clinical death, my family had gone out for dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. They are celebrating, I said more to myself than to Tracy. I do not think it is celebration. People react differently to overwhelming situations. Some cannot handle hospitals. But I knew better. The financial burden had been lifted from their shoulders when my heart stopped. In their minds, the problem was solving itself. Tracy checked my chart and frowned. There is something else you should know. Your oxygen deprivation during the cardiac events has caused some memory issues. Dr. Martinez wants to run tests, but the hospital administration is pressuring for immediate decisions about your care. What kind of memory issues? Short-term gaps, possibly some confusion about recent events. It should improve as you recover, but the damage could be permanent if you experience additional cardiac episodes. The irony was crushing. The family that claimed to love me had abandoned me so completely that their betrayal was literally erasing my memories. A social worker named Angela appeared in the doorway. She carried a folder thick with paperwork and wore the expression of someone who had delivered bad news many times before. "Mater, we need to discuss your care options." "Let me guess. My family told you they cannot help." Angela sat down and opened her folder. "Your father made it clear that the family cannot provide financial guarantees. He also mentioned that you have a history of poor decision-making." "What kind of history?" "According to him, you have been unemployed by choice-refused family assistance and failed to maintain proper insurance coverage." Each lie felt like another betrayal. The truth was completely different. 5 years ago, Harold's plumbing business had nearly collapsed during the economic downturn. I had loaned him $15,000 from my savings account money I had been saving for a house down payment. The loan had saved his business, but he had never repaid a single dollar. Similarly, when Janet's wedding approached and Rick's first business venture had failed, I had given her $10,000 to pay for the ceremony. She had promised to pay me back once Rick's real estate career took off, but that promise had been forgotten as soon as their financial situation improved. "Angela, my family owes me $25,000 in loans I made to help them during difficult times. They are claiming those were gifts now that I need help." Angela made notes on her paperwork. "Do you have documentation of these loans?" "They are family. I trusted them." "Without written agreements, there is no legal recourse. However, we can apply for charity care through the hospital's financial assistance program." She spread forms across my bedside table, each one requiring detailed financial information and documentation I did not have access to. The process would take weeks, and Dr. Martinez had made clear that my condition required immediate intervention. "There is another issue," Angela continued. "Hospital security reported that your parents have contacted building management about changing locks on the property where you have been staying." The final blow. I had been living in my childhood bedroom since losing my job helping with yard work and home maintenance in lieu of rent. Now they were making sure I had nowhere to go even if I survived. My phone had been sitting on the bedside table, and I noticed several missed calls from an unknown number with an international prefix. When I tried to call my parents, the calls went directly to voicemail, suggesting they had blocked my number entirely. Tracy returned with another nurse who began preparing equipment for additional tests. "The doctor wants to monitor your brain function after the oxygen deprivation. Memory loss can be progressive if not treated properly." As they worked, I stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to piece together recent events. Some memories felt foggy, like trying to recall a dream. Other details remained crystal clear, particularly the sound of my mother's voice dismissing my life as a series of poor choices. The unknown international number called again. This time, I answered desperate for any human connection that did not involve calculating the financial cost of my existence. "Better thank God you answered." The voice belonged to a woman with a slight accent I could not place. She sounded genuinely concerned, even panicked. "I am sorry, but I think you have the wrong number." No, this is Elena, your wife. Tracy called me when you collapsed." The words hit me like another electric shock to the chest. Wi-Fi had no memory of being married to anyone, let alone someone named Elena, who apparently lived in another country. Ma'am, I think there has been some mistake. I am not married. Mater listened to me carefully. You suffered oxygen deprivation when your heart stopped. The memory loss is temporary, but you need to trust me right now. I am flying back from Switzerland immediately. Her voice carried authority and genuine emotion, but my mind felt blank about any relationship with this person. I do not remember you at all. We met 2 years ago at a construction site where my company was investing. We got married 6 months ago in Las Vegas right before you lost your job. You insisted on keeping it private because you felt insecure about our financial differences. None of this sounded familiar, but the memory issues made it impossible to trust my own recollections. What financial differences? I run a renewable energy company. We are worth about $900 million. You were afraid people would think you married me for money. The conversation felt surreal. According to my family, I was an unemployed loser who made poor decisions. According to this stranger, I was married to a billionaire who cared enough to fly across the world when I got sick. Elena, if we are really married, why do I not remember anything about you? Because your family convinced you to keep our relationship secret. They said it would cause problems if people knew about the money. You've been so worried about their opinions that you even used a separate phone number to contact me. Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, his expression more serious than before. Mater, I need to discuss your condition. We found a blood clot near your heart that requires immediate surgical intervention. How immediate? Within the next few hours or the next cardiac episode will likely be fatal. Elena's voice came through the phone speaker with urgency. Doctor, this is his wife. I am authorizing whatever treatment he needs. Cost is not a factor. Dr. Martinez looked confused. Sir, your family indicated you were unmarried and that no one could authorize expensive procedures. My family lied. I said the words feeling strange but somehow true. Do whatever surgery I need. As Dr. Martinez left to prepare for the procedure, Elena continued talking. My assistant Marcus is arranging a private jet. I will be there within 8 hours with our medical team. Our medical team, Dr. Sarah Chen, is the best cardiac surgeon in the world. She has been on retainer for emergencies like this. The contrast was staggering. My birth family had abandoned me over medical bills while a woman I could not remember was flying world-renowned doctors across continents to save my life. Elena, what if my memory never comes back? What if I never remember loving you? Then we will build new memories together, but first we need to keep you alive. The call ended as nurses began preparing me for emergency surgery. Through the window, I could see the sun setting over the city, where my family was probably finishing their expensive dinner while I fought for survival. Tracy squeezed my hand gently. That woman loves you very much. Her voice was shaking when she called earlier. I wish I could remember her. Memory is not just what happened yesterday, it is also what you choose to build tomorrow. As the surgical team wheeled me toward the operating room, I held on to that thought. Maybe losing my family was not the end of everything. Maybe it was the beginning of remembering who I really was. The recovery room felt different when I woke up 6 hours later. Soft classical music played from speakers I had not noticed before, and the harsh fluorescent lighting had been replaced with warmer, more comfortable illumination. Dr. Martinez stood beside my bed with a satisfied expression, reviewing surgical notes on a tablet computer. The procedure went perfectly, he said. We removed the clot and inserted a temporary pacemaker to regulate your heart rhythm. You should make a complete recovery. How long was I out? About 4 hours of surgery, then 2 hours of observation. Your wife made some arrangements while you were under anesthesia. The word wife still felt foreign, but I noticed the hesitation in his voice had disappeared. Whatever Elena had done during my surgery had clearly changed the hospital's entire approach to my care. A woman's voice came from the hallway, speaking in rapid professional tones, about medical equipment and staff assignments. The voice grew closer, and I recognized it as Elena from our earlier phone conversation. When she appeared in the doorway, my breath caught, despite my lack of memory about her. Elena Rodriguez was strikingly beautiful, but not in the artificial way of magazine models. Her long black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore dark jeans and a simple white blouse that had clearly been thrown on quickly. What struck me most was her eyes, which held an intelligence and warmth that felt somehow familiar, even though my conscious mind did not recognize her. "How are you feeling?" she asked, moving to my bedside with the natural ease of someone who belonged there. "Confused but alive thanks to you." She smiled, and something deep in my chest responded to that expression, separate from the surgical pain. "That is a start. I brought some things that might help with your memory." Elena pulled out a leather photo album and opened it beside my bed. The first page showed pictures of a construction site with a tall, elegant woman in a hard hat talking to workers. In the photos, I could see myself in work clothes, listening intently to her explanations about solar panel installations. This was the Morrison Construction Solar Project 18 months ago. My company had contracted your firm to install panels on a new housing development. I studied the images, trying to trigger some recognition. "I remember the project. Morrison got that contract because we were the lowest bidder. Actually, you got the contract because I specifically requested Morrison Construction after meeting you at the initial site visit." "Why?" Elena turned the page to show more photos of us working together. In each image, we appeared to be having intense discussions about technical details, but our body language suggested something more personal developing. You were the only contractor who asked about the environmental impact of our manufacturing process. Everyone else just wanted to know about profit margins and installation timelines. You spent an hour questioning me about sustainable materials and worker safety protocols. The photos jogged fragments of memory. I could recall being impressed by her knowledge of construction techniques and her genuine concern for worker welfare. Most executives visited job sites for photo opportunities, but she had rolled up her sleeves and learned how to operate equipment. I remember thinking you were different from other corporate types. And I remember thinking you were different from other contractors. You actually cared about building something meaningful instead of just completing another project. Elena turned to photographs of us having coffee together, then dinner at various restaurants. In each image, we appeared more comfortable with each other, more connected. I could see myself laughing at something she had said, or her leaning forward to hear my response to a question. This was 3 months into the project. We'd started meeting after work to discuss modifications to the installation process. At least that was our excuse. What were we really doing? Falling in love, though neither of us wanted to admit it. You thought I was too sophisticated for a construction worker, and I thought you would be intimidated by my business success. Dr. Martinez interrupted our conversation with an update about my condition. The surgery was completely successful, but I want to keep you for observation for at least 24 hours. Your heart rhythm is stable, but we need to monitor for any complications. Dr. Elena said, "I would like to transfer him to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center for the observation period. Dr. Sarah Chen is flying in from Johns Hopkins to oversee his recovery." "That is not necessary. Our cardiac unit is perfectly capable of monitoring post-surgical patients." Elena's tone remained polite but carried unmistakable authority. "I am sure your facility is excellent, but Dr. Chen has been our family cardiologist for years. She knows his medical history better than anyone." The casual mention of our family and the implication that we had a long-standing relationship with world-renowned doctors suggested a life completely different from what I remembered. My family had always struggled to afford basic health care, but Elena spoke about flying in specialists as if it were routine. "I do not remember having a family cardiologist." "You do not remember having a family that actually cares about your health?" Elena replied gently. "Dr. Chen treated you for a minor arrhythmia last year. She recommended lifestyle changes that you followed religiously." A nurse entered the room with a clipboard full of forms. Mr. Thompson, I need to update your insurance information and emergency contacts. Elena immediately stepped forward. I will handle the insurance information. Please update his emergency contact to Elena Rodriguez Thompson, and here is the number for our family attorney if you need additional authorization. The name Thompson attached to Elena's name felt strange but somehow right. I watched her efficiently handle paperwork while explaining our insurance coverage through her company's executive plan. Within minutes, my status had changed from uninsured charity case to VIP patient with unlimited coverage. Elena, can I ask you something personal? Everything about this situation is personal. Why did I keep our marriage secret from my family? I mean, if you are as successful as you say, why would I hide that? Her expression grew sad, and she sat down beside my bed before answering. Because you were ashamed of not being able to contribute financially to our relationship. You felt like people would think you were using me for money. Were they right? Do you think someone who marries for money would spend 6 months living in their childhood bedroom rather than asking their billionaire wife for help? The question put everything in perspective. If I had married Elena for financial gain, I would never have struggled with unemployment or ended up in the emergency room without insurance. Instead, I had apparently been so concerned about maintaining my independence that I had nearly died rather than burden her with my problems. Elena opened her phone and showed me text messages between us over the past several months. The conversations revealed a loving relationship maintained despite physical distance and financial stress. She had repeatedly offered help that I had politely declined, and she had expressed frustration about my stubborn refusal to accept assistance. You texted me every day while I was in Switzerland. You told me about job interviews, about your family pressuring you to move out about feeling like a failure. I offered dozens of times to help, and you always changed the subject. Why did you not just come home early? Because you specifically asked me not to. You said you needed to figure things out on your own before we could build a life together. The texts showed a pattern of me minimizing my problems while Elena expressed growing concern about my health and stress levels. The most recent messages were from 3 days ago with her asking detailed questions about chest pains I had mentioned experiencing. Elena, I need you to know something. Even though I do not remember our relationship, I can feel that what you are telling me is true. It feels right in a way I cannot explain. She smiled and took my hand. That is all I need to hear. A commotion in the hallway interrupted our conversation. Through the window, I could see Harold and Susan arguing with hospital security about visiting restrictions. They had apparently returned from dinner and were demanding access to my room. But the new security protocols Elena had established were preventing entry. They want to see you, Elena observed, watching my parents through the glass. Probably to make sure I am still alive so they do not get blamed for anything. Elena's expression hardened as she watched my family. What exactly did they say while you were dying? I recounted the conversations I'd overheard about financial liability and their discussion about transferring me to county facilities. Elena listened without interrupting, but I could see anger building in her posture. They actually left to get dinner while you were clinically dead. Tracy showed me the security footage. They were toasting with wine while the crash team was trying to restart my heart. Elena stood up and walked to the window, where she could see my parents more clearly. Harold was gesticulating wildly, while Susan pointed toward my room, apparently explaining to security guards why they should be allowed access. Do you want to see them? Part of me does. They are still my family, even after everything that happened. And the other part remembers that they told the doctor to do whatever was cheapest because they were not responsible for my poor life choices. Elena turned back to me with the expression I had not seen before. It was the look of someone who had built a $900 million company by making difficult decisions and following through on them. I think it is time your family learned what poor life choices actually look like. The sound started as a distant rumble that gradually grew louder until the entire building seemed to vibrate. Other patients and staff members gathered at windows as the unmistakable whop, whop, whop of helicopter rotors approached the hospital. Through my room's window, I could see a sleek black aircraft circling the building before settling onto the rooftop landing pad. That would be Dr. Chen, Elena said casually, checking her phone for updates. She made excellent time from Baltimore. You have your own helicopter. The company has several aircraft for emergency situations. Dr. Chen insisted on bringing her complete surgical team in case there were complications with your recovery. Within minutes, the hospital's atmosphere had completely transformed. Staff members who had been treating me as a charity case suddenly appeared with warm smiles and offers of assistance. The same administrators who had pressured my family for financial guarantees now asked Elena if there was anything they could do to improve my comfort. Dr. Sarah Chen entered the room with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to saving lives. She was a small, elegant woman in her 50s who moved with surgical precision even in casual conversation. Behind her came two other doctors and a nurse practitioner, all carrying medical bags and tablet computers. "Hello, Mater," Dr. Chen said, reviewing my chart on her device. "I have been monitoring your condition remotely since Elena called me. The surgery appears to have been successful, but I want to run additional tests to ensure optimal recovery." "Is that really necessary? The doctors here seem to think everything went well." Dr. Chen exchanged a look with Elena that suggested they had discussed my case in detail during the flight. "The initial surgery was competent, but there are some factors about your cardiac episodes that concern me. The pattern of your symptoms suggests this might not be a typical heart attack." "What do you mean?" "I reviewed your family medical history, and there are no indicators for hereditary heart disease. Your age, fitness level, and lifestyle do not match the profile for cardiac events this severe. I want to investigate other possibilities." Elena sat down beside my bed as Dr. Chen's team began setting up portable diagnostic equipment. "Sarah has a theory about your condition that the emergency room doctors might have missed." "What kind of theory?" Dr. Chen attached sensors to my chest and arms while explaining her concerns. "Your symptoms and the timing of your cardiac episodes suggest you might have a rare genetic condition called arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia. It affects young, healthy adults and can be completely corrected with proper treatment." "You can fix it." "If my diagnosis is correct, yes. The condition requires a specific type of surgical intervention that most general hospitals are not equipped to perform. That is why I want to transfer you to Cedars-Sinai immediately." Elena's phone buzzed with a call from someone named Marcus. She stepped into the hallway to take the call while Dr. Chen continued her examination. Through the window, I could see my parents still arguing with security guards about access to my room. "Dr. Chen, can I ask you something about Elena?" "Of course." "I do not remember our relationship at all. How can I know if what she is telling me about our marriage is real?" Dr. Chen smiled while reviewing test results on her tablet. "I performed your pre-marriage physical examination 6 months ago. You were concerned about a minor heart murmur and wanted to make sure you were healthy before starting a family with Elena." "I wanted to start a family. You spent an hour asking me about genetic risks and prenatal care. You were more nervous about the medical consultation than most people are about their wedding ceremony." The conversation triggered a vague memory of sitting in a doctor's office somewhere holding hands with a woman while discussing family planning. The details remained foggy, but the emotional content felt real. Elena returned from her phone call with a grim expression. "Marcus has been investigating your family's financial situation. We need to talk about what he discovered." "What kind of investigation?" "The kind that billionaire wives conduct when someone tries to kill their husband by withholding medical care." Dr. Chen finished her tests and began packing her equipment. "The good news is that my diagnosis appears correct. You have a genetic condition that is completely treatable. The bad news is that without proper intervention, you could experience additional cardiac episodes. How soon can we fix it?" "I have an operating room reserved at Cedars-Sinai for tomorrow morning. The procedure takes about 4 hours, and you should make a complete recovery within weeks." Elena helped me into a wheelchair as Dr. Chen's team prepared for transport to the helicopter. As we moved through the hospital corridors, I could see my parents following, at a distance, apparently trying to determine where I was being taken. The helicopter ride to Cedars-Sinai took only 20 minutes, but it felt like entering a completely different world. Instead of sterile emergency room chaos, I was transferred to a private suite with hardwood floors, comfortable furniture, and windows overlooking the city. The medical equipment was state-of-the-art but designed to blend seamlessly into an environment that felt more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. "This is where you will recover after surgery tomorrow," Elena explained as nurses helped me into the hospital bed. "I have the adjoining suite so I can stay close during your treatment." "Elena, I need to ask you about something Marcus discovered regarding my family." She settled into a chair beside my bed and opened a folder of documents that had apparently been faxed to the hospital. "Your father, Harold, has been embezzling money from his plumbing clients for the past 3 years. What? He collects deposits for major jobs, then uses that money to cover operating expenses for his business. When clients demand refunds or threaten legal action, he takes deposits from new clients to pay off the previous ones. It is essentially a Ponzi scheme." The revelation explained Harold's extreme reaction to my medical bills. He was not protecting his legitimate business assets. He was trying to avoid detection of his financial crimes. "How much money are we talking about?" "About $200,000 in stolen deposits. Marcus found at least 12 clients who have filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau." Elena turned to another section of the folder. "Your sister Janet and her husband Rick are facing bankruptcy despite their wealthy appearance. They owe over $300,000 in credit card debt and personal loans. How is that possible? Rick always talks about his successful real estate deals." "Because most of his successful deals exist only on paper. He has been using credit cards to fund fake investment projects, then using loans to pay credit card bills. They are 3 payments behind on their mortgage." The information painted a picture of a family living elaborate lies to maintain appearances. They had not abandoned me out of simple cruelty. They had abandoned me because acknowledging my medical crisis would have forced them to confront their own financial desperation. "What about my mother?" Elena hesitated before answering. "Susan has been skimming money from customer accounts at the bank where she works. Marcus found evidence of dozens of small transfers over the past 2 years. She is currently under federal investigation. They are all criminals. They are all desperate people who made increasingly bad choices to avoid facing reality." Sound familiar? The parallel was obvious. My family had been lying about their finances just as I had been lying about my marriage to Elena. The difference was that they had chosen to harm other people to maintain their deceptions, while I had only hurt myself. "Elena, what happens now?" "Now you focus on getting healthy. Tomorrow Dr. Chen will fix your heart condition permanently. After that we can decide what kind of relationship we want to have with your family." "What kind of relationship do you think we should have?" Elena stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city lights. "I think people deserve a chance to choose honesty over deception. But they have to actually make that choice, not just continue lying when it becomes convenient." A nurse appeared with evening medications and a schedule for pre-surgical preparations. As she worked, Elena's phone rang with another call from Marcus. This one apparently about legal matters related to my family's situation. "Your parents are downstairs in the lobby," the nurse mentioned casually. "They have been asking about visiting hours and your condition." "Do you want to see them?" Elena asked after ending her call. "I think they deserve a chance to explain themselves, but I also think they deserve to know that their lies have consequences." Elena smiled, and I could see the strategic mind that had built a business empire. "I was hoping you would say that. Marcus has prepared some documents that should make for an interesting family conversation." "What kind of documents?" "The kind that give people a choice between honesty and federal prison." As the evening settled over Los Angeles, I realized that my heart attack had been more than a medical emergency. It had been the catalyst that would force everyone in my family to choose who they really wanted to be. Tomorrow, Dr. Chen would fix my genetic heart condition permanently. Tonight, Elena and I would discover whether my family's moral condition could be repaired at all. The conference room at Elena's law firm overlooked Century City from the 32nd floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Los Angeles. My family sat around the polished mahogany table, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the expensive art and custom furnishings. Harold kept adjusting his tie, Susan clutched her purse tightly, and Janet whispered nervously to Rick about why they had been summoned to meet with Elena's attorneys. 24 hours had passed since Dr. Chen's successful surgery. My genetic heart condition had been completely corrected through a minimally invasive procedure that involved installing a small device to regulate electrical impulses. I felt stronger and more energetic than I had in months, as if my body was finally functioning the way it was designed to. Elena sat at the head of the table wearing a charcoal business suit that commanded respect without trying to intimidate. Beside her sat Daniel Morrison, the senior partner whose firm handled legal matters for Elena's company. Across from them sat Cameron Brooks, Elena's private investigator with a thick folder of documents that would determine my family's future. "Thank you all for coming," Elena began in the same tone she probably used for corporate board meetings. "We need to discuss several matters regarding Matter's medical emergency and the family dynamics that contributed to his condition." Harold cleared his throat and attempted to take control of the conversation. "Look, we appreciate what you have done for our son, but family matters should stay within the family. We do not need outsiders interfering in private business." "Mr. Thompson," Daniel replied smoothly, "your son is my client's husband. That makes family matters our business, especially when those matters involve potential criminal activity." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic 32 floors below. Susan's face had gone pale while Rick shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "What criminal activity?" Janet demanded. "We have not done anything illegal." Cameron opened his folder and spread documents across the table. "Actually, we have evidence of multiple criminal activities involving every member of your family." The first set of documents related to Harold's plumbing business. Bank statements, client contracts, and deposit records painted a clear picture of systematic fraud spanning 3 years. "Mr. Thompson, you have collected over $200,000 in deposits for plumbing jobs that were never completed. When clients demand refunds, you use deposits from new clients to pay them off. Under federal law, this constitutes wire fraud and mail fraud, both felonies." Harold's hands shook as he reviewed the evidence. "Those are just cash flow issues. Construction businesses always have timing problems with payments. Cash flow issues do not explain why you have collected deposits for jobs that never had permits pulled or materials ordered," Cameron continued. "Nor do they explain why 12 clients have filed complaints alleging that you deliberately misrepresented project timelines to collect money you knew you could not earn." Elena turned to Susan with documentation from the federal banking investigation. "Mrs. Thompson, you are currently under investigation by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency for embezzling funds from customer accounts at Pacific Coast Bank." Susan's banking experience made it impossible for her to deny the sophistication of the evidence. Spreadsheets showed dozens of small transfers from dormant accounts into her personal checking account, each one carefully calculated to avoid triggering automatic fraud detection systems. "Those were just temporary loans," Susan whispered. "I always intended to pay the money back." "Temporary loans that you never reported to bank management and never documented properly," Daniel observed. "The total amount involved is over $60,000, which qualifies as a federal crime punishable by up to 10 years in prison." Janet and Rick's documentation was equally damning. Credit card statements, loan applications, and real estate records revealed a web of financial deception designed to maintain the appearance of wealth while accumulating massive debt. You have misrepresented your income on loan applications, used business credit lines for personal expenses, and claimed assets that do not exist, Cameron explained. Your mortgage application alone contains 14 false statements about your financial status. Rick attempted to maintain his swagger despite the evidence. Real estate is a complex business. Sometimes paperwork gets confused during transactions. Confusion does not explain why you claim to own properties that belong to other people or why you listed employment income from companies that have no record of paying you, Elena replied coldly. The room fell silent as my family absorbed the extent of their legal exposure. Each of them faced potential federal charges, significant prison time, and financial ruin. Their desperate attempts to maintain appearances had led them into a web of criminal activity that could destroy their lives. "Why are you showing us this?" Harold finally asked. Elena leaned forward with an expression I was beginning to recognize as her negotiating face. "Because despite your despicable behavior at the hospital, Mater still cares about your welfare. Against my better judgment, he has asked me to offer you a chance to resolve these matters without criminal prosecution." "What kind of chance?" Daniel slid new documents across the table. "Complete financial transparency, public acknowledgement of your treatment of Mater during his medical emergency, and full repayment of the money you borrowed from him over the years." "We do not have $25,000, Janet protested. "You do not have $25,000 in liquid assets, Elena corrected. "But you do have assets that can be liquidated, and you do have the ability to establish payment plans for restitution." Cameron produced additional documents outlining a comprehensive resolution plan. Harold would sell his business and use the proceeds to repay defrauded clients, then work as an employee for a legitimate plumbing company while making monthly restitution payments. Susan would resign from the bank, enter a plea agreement for probation instead of prison time, and perform community service while repaying embezzled funds. Janet and Rick would file for bankruptcy, surrender their house and luxury items, and move into affordable housing while working regular jobs to pay off debts honestly. "This is essentially financial suicide," Rick complained. "No. I said, speaking for the first time since we had gathered. Financial suicide is what you were already doing. This is financial recovery." Harold looked directly at me with an expression of shame I had never seen before. "Son, we know we acted terribly at the hospital. We were scared about money and made the wrong choices. You were scared about money, so you decided I should die to solve your problems. That is not what we wanted. But it is what you chose when you walked away from my hospital bed to have dinner while I was clinically dead." Susan began crying softly. "We have been living lies for so long that we forgot how to handle real problems honestly. The question now," Elena interjected, "is whether you want to continue living lies or start building authentic relationships with your son." Janet wiped tears from her eyes and looked at the legal documents. "If we agree to this plan, what happens to our relationship with Mater Ah? That depends entirely on your behavior going forward," I replied. "If you choose honesty and accountability, we can rebuild trust over time. If you choose to continue lying and blaming other people for your problems, then you will have chosen not to have a relationship with me." The ultimatum was clear and non-negotiable. My family could choose truth and consequences, or they could choose deception and criminal prosecution. They could not choose both lies and relationships. Harold was the first to sign the documents. "I am tired of living like a criminal. I want to fix what I have broken." Susan signed next, followed reluctantly by Janet and Rick. As each signature was added to the legal agreements, I could see the relief in their faces despite the financial consequences they were accepting. "There is one more thing," Elena said as the documents were notarized. "Mater and I are renewing our wedding vows next month. You are invited to attend, but only if you can honestly celebrate our relationship instead of resenting my financial success." "Why would you want us there after everything we have done?" Susan asked. "Because families should witness important moments together, and because Mater believes in forgiveness even when I think people do not deserve it. As we left the law firm that afternoon, my family had a choice to make about who they wanted to become. The lies and financial crimes that had driven their cruelty were being addressed through legal consequences and restitution plans. Now they would discover whether their relationships with each other and with me could survive the transition to honesty. Elena took my hand as we walked to her car in the underground garage. How do you feel about giving them another chance? I feel like I am gambling with my emotional well-being, but I also feel like it is the right thing to do. And if they choose to continue being dishonest, then they will be choosing not to be part of our family. For the first time since my heart attack, I felt like my future was based on authentic relationships rather than financial desperation or emotional manipulation. Tomorrow, my family would begin the hard work of rebuilding their lives honestly. Tonight, Elena and I could focus on building our marriage on the foundation of truth rather than the secrets that had nearly cost me my life. 3 months after the confrontation at Elena's law firm, I stood in the kitchen of our Malibu home preparing Sunday dinner for my family. The view through the windows showed waves crashing against the rocks below, while seagulls circled overhead in the late afternoon sun. Elena was setting the table on our deck, arranging flowers she had grown in the garden we'd planted together during my recovery. The transformation in my life felt miraculous, but the changes in my family's behavior were even more remarkable. Harold had sold his plumbing business to a competitor and now worked as a senior technician for a large commercial firm. The regular paycheck and honest work environment had restored his self-respect, even though his income was significantly lower than what he had earned as a business owner. "Smells wonderful in here," Harold said, as he and Susan arrived carrying a homemade apple pie. At 62, my father looked healthier and more relaxed than he had in years. The stress of maintaining criminal activity had taken a physical toll that honest work was gradually reversing. Susan had accepted a plea bargain that resulted in probation, community service, and full restitution to the bank's customers. She now worked as a financial counselor for a nonprofit organization that helped low-income families manage their money. The irony was not lost on any of us, but her experience with financial desperation had made her exceptionally effective at helping others avoid similar mistakes. "How was the literacy center this week?" I asked, as Susan helped arrange food on serving platters. "We helped a single mother establish her first savings account," Susan replied with genuine pride. "She's been working 2 jobs for 3 years, but never had enough left over to save anything. We found places in her budget to set aside $50 monthly." The work paid only a fraction of her previous banking salary, but Susan approached it with enthusiasm that had been missing from her corporate career. She had discovered that helping people solve financial problems was more satisfying than simply processing their transactions. Janet and Rick arrived shortly after carrying groceries they had purchased for our shared meal. The couple who had once flaunted expensive clothes and luxury cars now drove a modest sedan and shopped carefully for value. Janet worked as an administrative assistant for a medical practice, while Rick had taken a sales position with a legitimate real estate company. "How is the new apartment?" Elena asked as we gathered around the dining table. "Small but comfortable," Janet replied. "It feels good to pay rent that we can actually afford instead of constantly worrying about mortgage payments." Rick added, "The weird thing is that we argue less now that we are not stressed about money all the time. When you are living within your means, you can actually enjoy each other's company." Their bankruptcy had eliminated most of their debts, but the emotional process of downsizing their lifestyle had been more challenging than the financial aspects. Janet had struggled initially with the loss of status and appearance of wealth, but gradually discovered that authentic relationships were more valuable than impressive possessions. As we shared the meal, Elena and I had prepared, the conversation flowed naturally between family news work experiences and future plans. Harold described a commercial plumbing project that would restore water systems in a low-income housing complex. Susan talked about expanding the financial literacy program to include classes for teenagers. Janet shared news about the medical practice where she worked, including stories about helping patients navigate insurance complications. The contrast with our previous family dynamic was striking. Instead of competition and financial anxiety, our conversations centered around meaningful work and genuine concern for each other's well-being. The crisis that had nearly destroyed our relationships had ultimately forced us to build something stronger and more honest. "I need to share some news," Elena announced as we finished dinner and moved to the deck for dessert. "The foundation that Mater and I established has been selected for a major federal grant to expand medical emergency assistance nationwide." "How major?" Harold asked. $50 million over 5 years, I replied. "We will be able to help thousands of families avoid the kind of crisis I experienced at the hospital." The foundation had grown from Elena's initial idea into a comprehensive program that provided immediate financial assistance for medical emergencies, helped families navigate insurance complications, and advocated for healthcare policy reform. My experience as both a patient and a family member dealing with medical crisis had provided valuable insights into the practical challenges people face during health emergencies. Susan leaned forward with interest. Would there be opportunities for volunteers with banking and financial experience? "Actually, we have been hoping you would consider joining the foundation as our Director of Family Financial Counseling," Elena replied. "The position would pay well and allow you to use your banking skills to help people instead of just processing transactions." "Are you serious?" "Completely. You understand both the banking system and the desperation that leads people to make poor financial choices. That combination of knowledge and empathy is exactly what we need." Harold cleared his throat and addressed Elena directly. "I need to apologize again for how we treated you and Mater during his medical emergency. We were so focused on our own financial problems that we forgot what family really means." "You do not need to keep apologizing," Elena replied. "What matters is how you choose to behave going forward." "But I do need to apologize," Harold continued. "Not just for the hospital, but for 20 years of teaching my children that money was more important than relationships." The admission carried weight because it acknowledged patterns of behavior that had led to our family's crisis. Harold's business success had always been accompanied by messages that financial security justified almost any sacrifice, including honesty and emotional connection. Janet spoke up quietly. "I realize now that I married Rick partly because I thought wealth would solve all my problems. When his business started failing, I panicked because I had never learned how to be happy without expensive things. And I enabled that," Rick added. "Instead of being honest about our financial problems, I created bigger lies to maintain the illusion of success." The conversation continued as the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. For the first time in years, my family was engaging in honest self-reflection instead of blame and defensive justification. The legal consequences of their criminal activity had forced them to confront reality, but the emotional growth was happening because they were choosing accountability over victimhood. As my parents and Janet and Rick prepared to leave, Elena announced one more surprise. "Mater and I want to share some personal news. We are expecting our first child." The news triggered genuine celebration and excitement. Susan immediately began planning to become a grandmother, while Harold talked about building baby furniture in his spare time. Janet and Rick offered to help with childcare and expressed hope that their own relationship was now stable enough to consider having children. This baby will grow up in a family that values honesty and authentic relationships. I said, watching my family embrace Elena with congratulations. "Will you raise the child to know about everything that happened with our family?" Janet asked. "We will raise our child to understand that people can choose to change and grow," Elena replied. "But we will also make sure they understand that actions have consequences and that family love must be based on truth rather than manipulation. As our family members drove away that evening, Elena and I sat on our deck watching stars appear over the ocean. 3 months earlier, I had been an unemployed construction worker whose family had abandoned him during a medical emergency. Now I was married to a woman I loved, expecting our first child, and running a foundation that would help thousands of families facing medical crises. "Do you think they have really changed?" Elena asked, referring to my family. "I think they are choosing to change every day, just like we are choosing to forgive and rebuild trust. And if they stop making good choices, then we will stop including them in our lives. But I believe people can grow if they are held accountable for their behavior while being offered genuine support for positive changes." The baby Elena carried would grow up knowing their grandparents' aunt and uncle as people who had made serious mistakes but had chosen redemption over continued deception. Our child would learn that family relationships require honesty, accountability, and mutual respect rather than just shared genetics. Elena took my hand as we headed inside to plan our new life together. "You know what I love most about this whole experience?" "What?" "You almost died because your heart stopped working properly, but you actually came alive when you learned what love really means." She was right. The genetic condition that had threatened my life had been completely cured by Dr. Chen's surgery. But the emotional condition that had nearly destroyed my family required ongoing daily choices about honesty, forgiveness, and authentic connection. As we settled into bed that night, I realized that my heart attack had been both an ending and a beginning. It had ended the phase of my life where I accepted relationships based on manipulation and financial anxiety. It had begun the phase where I insisted on relationships based on truth, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Tomorrow, my family would continue the daily work of choosing honesty over deception, accountability over blame, and love over fear. Tonight, Elena and I could rest knowing that our future was built on the strongest possible foundation, two people who had chosen each other based on authentic love rather than financial convenience or family obligation. 1 year later, I stood in the delivery room at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center holding my newborn daughter, Sophia Elena Thompson, while Elena recovered from what Dr. Chen had called a textbook perfect delivery. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength, and her dark eyes seemed to focus on my face with the same intelligence I recognized in her mother. "She looks like you," Elena said softly from the hospital bed, her hair damp with perspiration, but her expression radiant with joy. "She has your eyes and your stubborn chin," I replied, gently stroking Sophia's cheek. "Poor kid is going to be unstoppable." The contrast with my experience in this same hospital a year earlier was remarkable. Instead of family members arguing about money while I fought for my life, we were surrounded by people celebrating new life and expressing genuine love for each other. Harold sat in a corner chair working on a small wooden rocking horse he had been carving for his granddaughter. His hands moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades working with tools, but his expression held a tenderness I had rarely seen during my childhood. Susan was organizing baby clothes that she had been collecting for months, each outfit carefully selected and washed with the attention of someone who understood this might be her only chance to be a grandmother. "Have you decided on the middle name?" Susan asked, folding a tiny yellow dress that would fit Sophia in a few months. "Sophia Elena Rodriguez Thompson," Elena replied. "We want her to carry both family names so she understands where she comes from." Janet and Rick had arrived with flowers and a photo album they had created documenting Elena's pregnancy over the past 9 months. Their faces showed genuine happiness rather than the artificial expressions that had characterized their interactions during their wealthy facade period. "Rick and I have some news to share," Janet announced. "We are pregnant too. The baby is due in 7 months." The news triggered another round of congratulations and excited planning. Harold immediately began discussing plans for building a second rocking horse, while Susan talked about organizing childcare schedules so both grandchildren would receive proper attention. Two cousins born in the same year, Elena observed. Sophia will have a built-in best friend. Dr. Chen appeared to check on Elena's recovery and to meet her newest patient. She examined Sophia with the gentle thoroughness of someone who had delivered thousands of babies, but still found each birth miraculous. Perfect health, she announced. Strong heart, excellent reflexes, and clearly inherited her parents' intelligence based on how alert she is. Dr. Chen, I cannot thank you enough for everything you have done for our family, I said, adjusting Sophia's blanket as she fell asleep in my arms. Saving lives is my job, she replied. But watching families heal and grow together is the part that makes the work meaningful. Marcus Elena's assistant arrived with legal documents related to the Foundation's expansion and updates about our medical assistance program. In the past year, we had helped over 800 families facing medical emergencies, providing immediate financial assistance while advocating for healthcare policy reforms that would prevent future crises. The congressional hearing is scheduled for next month, Marcus reported. They want you to testify about the need for emergency medical assistance programs. I assume they want to hear about our family's experience, Elena said. Actually, they want to hear about all the families you have helped since then. Your personal story was the catalyst, but the Foundation's impact is what will drive policy changes. The Foundation had grown beyond our initial vision into a comprehensive support system for families facing medical emergencies. We provided not just financial assistance, but also navigation help for insurance complications, legal advocacy, for patients facing discrimination, and educational programs for healthcare providers about family dynamics during medical crises. Harold looked up from his wood carving. Would it help if I testified about what it was like to be the family member who made the wrong choice? What do you mean? Marcus asked. I mean that families need support and education before they face medical emergencies, not just after they make terrible decisions. Maybe if someone had helped us understand our options and responsibilities, we would not have abandoned our son when he needed us most. The suggestion opened up a new dimension for our advocacy work. Most medical assistance programs focused on patients, but Harold's experience highlighted the need for family education and support systems that prevented abandonment and financial panic during emergencies. That is actually a brilliant insight, Elena said. We could develop programs that help families prepare for medical emergencies before they happen. As visiting hours continued, our room filled with flowers, gifts, and expressions of love from people who had become important parts of our extended family. Tracy, the nurse who had called Elena during my heart attack, stopped by to meet Sophia and share updates about other patients she had helped connect with family members during medical emergencies. Angela, the social worker who had tried to arrange charity care during my crisis, brought information about policy changes that would make emergency medical assistance more accessible to families without insurance. Your story has changed how this hospital approaches family financial counseling, Angela explained. We now have social workers who specialize in helping families navigate medical emergencies without abandoning their loved ones. As evening approached and visiting hours ended, Elena and I were left alone with Sophia to begin our life as a family. The baby slept peacefully between us on the hospital bed while we watched the sunset over Los Angeles through the same windows where I had once watched my birth family choose money over my life. What are you thinking about? Elena asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. I am thinking about how this room represents both the worst and best moments of my life. A year ago, I thought I was dying alone and unloved. Tonight, I am holding our daughter surrounded by people who genuinely care about our family's well-being. Do you ever regret the way things happened? I mean, would you change it if you could prevent your heart attack and your family's betrayal? I considered the question carefully while watching Sophia's tiny chest rise and fall with each breath. If preventing my heart attack meant never discovering the truth about my family's character and never building an authentic relationship with you, then no, I would not change anything. Even the part where you almost died, especially that part. I had to almost lose everything to discover what was really worth keeping. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Chen confirming that we could go home tomorrow morning. Our house in Malibu was ready with a nursery overlooking the ocean where Sophia would spend her first months surrounded by the sounds of waves and seagulls. Elena, I want to ask you something important. Anything. When Sophia grows up and asks about her family's history, how do you want to tell her about what happened during my heart attack? Elena was quiet for several minutes before answering. I want to tell her that her grandparents, aunt, and uncle made serious mistakes when they were scared and desperate, but that they chose to learn from those mistakes and become better people. I want her to understand that family love must be based on honesty and mutual respect, not just shared genetics. And if she asks why we forgave them, I want to tell her that forgiveness is not about ignoring harmful behavior, but about giving people opportunities to change while protecting yourself from continued harm. Your family earned forgiveness by choosing accountability and making amends, not just by asking for it. Sophia stirred in her sleep and opened her eyes, looking directly at me with the focused attention that newborns sometimes display. In her expression, I could see the potential for a life built on authentic relationships rather than financial anxiety or family manipulation. "Welcome to the world, little one," I whispered. "You are going to grow up knowing that love is measured by how people treat each other during difficult times, not by how much money they have or how successful they appear to be." As I held my daughter and watched Elena rest peacefully beside me, I realized that my heart attack had taught me the most valuable lesson possible. Authenticity and love are the only currencies that truly enrich our lives. When we stop hiding behind pride and money, we discover that honest relationships provide security that no amount of wealth can match. My family had almost lost me forever because they forgot that lesson, but crisis had become our salvation. We had learned that sometimes the most painful experiences force us to discover what really matters. Tonight, surrounded by people who had chosen truth over deception and love over fear, I understood that the best life possible was not measured by financial success or social status, but by the depth and honesty of our connections with each other. Sophia would grow up in a family that valued these principles, surrounded by grandparents and aunt and uncle, and parents who had learned that real wealth comes from relationships built on trust, accountability, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Tomorrow, Elena and I would take our daughter home to begin building memories based on love rather than lies. Tonight we could rest, knowing that our future was secure, not because of money in the bank, but because of the authentic family we had chosen to create together. As I drifted off to sleep holding my wife and daughter, I felt grateful for every moment of pain that had led us to this point. Sometimes the greatest gift life can give us is the opportunity to start over with the wisdom to choose love over everything else. Have you ever experienced a moment when crisis forced you to discover what truly matters in your relationships? I would love to hear your thoughts about family forgiveness and the difference between genuine love and conditional support in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to hear more stories about finding authentic connection in our complicated world. Share this with someone who might benefit from understanding that real wealth comes from honest relationships rather than financial success. And thank you for taking this journey with me tonight. May you always have the courage to choose truth over comfort and love over fear in your own family relationships.